Hey folks, Dr. Mike here with a super quick weekly tip. How do you detect that you're having a good mind-muscle connection, and how do you perfect your mind-muscle connection? First of all, what the hell is a mind-muscle connection? Before that, we have to answer a very related question of what the raw stimulus magnitude is. It is a proxy, an estimate, an idea, a hypothetical about how much muscle growth stimulus a given unit of training is likely to be causing. When you say like, oh man, that leg press really fucked up my quads, like you're essentially saying in much less scientific language that, man, that raw stimulus magnitude of that leg press machine, of that number of sets I did, is very high. Notice that the raw stimulus magnitude is not the same thing as the stimulus to fatigue ratio. The stimulus to fatigue ratio is the raw stimulus magnitude on top in the numerator, but in the denominator, it's how much fatigue. So we're saying, man, that leg press fucked me up. We're saying in a good way for sure, high raw stimulus magnitude. We're not saying anything about how fatiguing it was. If your knees are great and you feel fine, then it was low fatigue. But if your knees are fucked up, hips are fucked up, and you feel like shit, maybe it was high fatigue. Here, we're just talking about the raw stimulus magnitude. And the raw stimulus magnitude is proxied by three other things: the mind-muscle connection, how much of a mind-muscle connection you get from that exercise, let's say, the pump, how much of a pump you get, and the degree of disruption. Don't worry, future videos will cover the pump and the disruption. For now, we're just going to talk about mind-muscle connection. So remember, the more of a mind-muscle connection you can get in an exercise, the better. The more raw stimulus magnitude you have, and thus the more growth, all things being equal, you are likely to cause. So basically, the more mind-muscle connection, MMC for short, MMC, I used to be a DJ. Many people don't know this. That was before my French chef thing. You guys know about that. So in any case, more mind-muscle connection you can have, all things being equal, the more muscle growth. So how the fuck, well, first of all, what is it, and how do we get a lot of it? At RP, and in our hypertrophy book, we define the mind-muscle connection as the amount of tension and or burn that you get in your target muscle for that exercise. At lower reps, generally, you tend to feel tension. So for example, if you're doing, let's say, incline barbell press for your chest, sets of like 5 to 10, you feel your pecs, like the tension super expanding on the way down, and crunching really hard at the top. If someone came up to you and they're like, hey man, you feel a lot of tension in your pecs doing that exercise? And you're like, no. They'd be like, so you think you're doing it right? Because I think it's a chest exercise. And if your muscles, the chest, aren't producing seemingly a lot of tension, what the hell is going on, right? And you're like, if I feel it a ton of my front delts, a ton of tension in my triceps, not a lot of my chest, maybe it's the wrong exercise, maybe it's the wrong rep range, maybe the technique is off. Something has to change. However, if you are doing incline barbell press in sets of 5 to 10 to hit your chest, and you feel a crap load of tension in your pecs, 99 problems you may have, supplying a good stimulus to the chest probably isn't one of them. That's a very, very good sign. On the other hand, what about at higher reps? Because you could say, okay, what about machine chest presses, sets of like 20? Yeah, tension you feel, but it's high reps. How do you know if you're really hitting your chest? Well, this part of the mind-muscle connection is the burn. If you get a gnarly, gnarly burn in your pecs and not a ton in your triceps, not a ton in your front delts, you know with a pretty decent certainty, at least the beginning of it, that, yeah, man, the chest is doing something, because how is the chest going to create all these metabolites if it's not contracting? And if it's contracting, that means muscle stimulus is occurring. So it's some combination of pump and burn. Now, if you're doing middle of the road rep ranges, let's say leg presses for sets of 15, do you feel tension in your quads? Yes. Do you feel a burn? Also yes. So ideally you sort of have a combination of these, but either one of them by themselves is a really, really good thing. That's how you detect the mind-muscle connection. So if someone asks you when you're doing lunges, hey, do you feel that in your glutes? Feel that in your glutes? If you don't feel tension in your glutes during the repetitions, if you don't feel a burn towards the end, you feel a ton of tension in your quads though and a ton of burn in your quads, and someone's like, hey man, hitting your glutes, you could say, mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, I see, lunges, great, good job. And they walk off. But then you're like sitting on the bench, you're like, am I lying to myself and others? Because clearly my quads are feeling some shit. What about my glutes? There are other ways of seeing if you hit your glutes. We'll talk about those in videos next week. However, you would hope some tension is felt or some burn is felt in the target muscle. It's a very good sign. That's the mind-muscle connection. Easy said, maybe not so easy done. So how do we perfect our mind-muscle connection? Because a lot of people struggle with this. There are 3 goals to accomplish in really perfecting your mind-muscle connection. These 3 goals can happen years apart from each other. Here's goal number 1. Hey, do you want to like go on a date with me? Okay. Hey, we're going on a date. Cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. First, be well practiced in how to detect target muscle tension and or burn. You can't perfect a mind-muscle connection if you can't even tell what the tension is. So first of all, you have to know what muscles you're training. You can't tell a beginner, like who doesn't know what a gluteus maximus is, or who doesn't know what the, long head of the triceps is. Like, hey, do you feel that in your long head? They're like, uh-huh. And you're like, do you know what that is? They're like, point to the long head of your triceps. They're like, right there? You're like, no. So first of all, you have to know some anatomy. And you have to know what tension feels like and what the burn feels like. Because remember, if you're a personal trainer, a lot of you guys watching this are, a lot of clients, when they're beginners, can't even tell between like an injury kind of pain and a burn kind of pain. I've had clients be like, oh my God, they have to stop squatting. I'm like, are you okay? They're like, oh, my legs hurt. I'm like, okay, like where? And they're like, you just here. And they kind of rub their quads. I'm like, is it like a really sharp kind of pain? They're like, no, it's getting better now, but ooh, it's like a burn. I'm like, that's a good thing. And they're like, oh. And they're like, oh. This is going to be like this every day. I'm like, what the fuck did I sign up for, right? So first of all, you have to kind of know what tension and burn are. However, after that, here's the big thing. There are two foundations for how to detect the tension and the burn. One is to have good technique. If your goal is to detect the tension and burn, you have to input the actual effort to get the tension and the burn to the target muscles. If your technique in the bench press is like this, shoulders forward and caved in and shit, and someone's like, hey, you getting tension in your pecs? You're like, I don't think so. Well, you're not fucking using your pecs barely, using a ton of front delts and triceps. But if you arch and retract properly and go super deep, I would, but I'd fall back out of the chair. Then with good technique, you're like, oh, I feel it in the right place. So the absolute critical core foundation of feeling the tension and or burn in the target muscle is to have good technique to begin with. A lot of times people will leg press or squat or do pull-ups, and every 50 trillion other exercises a little bit wrong or a lot wrong, and they actually can't generate the tension, can't generate the burn in the target muscles. Absolutely, if someone has bad technique, and this is something I get super often, like, hey, I'm trying to work on my mind-muscle connection, and I'm like, okay, well, show me a video of you training, and they show me a video, I'm like, I don't even fucking know what muscle group you're. What the fuck is that? Are you having some kind of like episode, or is that an exercise? Like, that's a deadlift. I'm like, no, that's you giving birth in reverse. You got to fix some shit, right? Once your technique is good, you can actually do a decent job of targeting the muscles. Secondly, a high degree of tension can be detected if you're far from fail with heavier weights. But if they're really heavy, you're automatically close to fail. The burn doesn't actually start to occur until you're close to failure. So if you, let's say, have a client and they're doing lunges for their glutes, and let's say they are a beginner, and they do some steps and they're like, ooh, okay, I think that's it. The set is over. Like, oh, gotcha. It was a pretty good set. Did you get a burn in your glutes? They're like, I don't think so, no. They're like, okay, how many more lunges do you think you could have done? They're like, I don't know, maybe 2 more. And you're like, I'll try doing some more. And they do like 50 more lunges and they look at you like, oh yeah, I can feel it. Like, come on, you're nowhere close to failure. If you get close to failure, then you feel the burn. So a lot of times when people ask the question of like, well, you said we're supposed to feel the burn in this exercise, but I don't. Okay, how's your technique? Oh, it looks good, fine. Check, foundation 1. Foundation 2, are you pushing close to fail? If you push close to fail on a bench press with your pecs, you will feel some fucking tension. And in a machine high rep press, if you say, well, I don't feel the burn on my pecs, go close to failure, go all the way to failure. Rep number 23, they're like, fuck. You guys ever get out of a machine? You're like, you feel like you're on fire. Like, get a fucking fire hose. Put me out. This shit is crazy. So if you have good technique and you can push close to fail, then you're ready to really start to process what a mind-muscle connection is. And my big tip to you guys, if you're a beginner, first 2-3 years of training, or if you're working with beginner clients, I wouldn't even worry about the mind-muscle connection. This is an advanced thing. Goal number 2. Once you have good technique and you have the ability to push close to fail, your next goal should be to optimize your technique and level of effort to take a good tension/burn in exercises that you normally do and make it great. This takes years. You can play around with foot positioning in the leg press and the squat and the stiff-legged deadlift. You can play around with hand positioning. You can play around with depth. You can play around with elbow angle and 50 trillion different other things. You're going to find it because your body's different than everybody else's. You're special, just like everybody else. You're going to have slightly different hand and foot positions and techniques that lead to you feeling it more. And the thing is, I never really, if someone has the basic techniques down, I never judge them on the specifics. Like, I do skull crushers like this. Charlie does them like this. Jared does them like that. And all of us do slightly different, but the core is we figured out a technique that really puts the tension on our triceps and gets a crazy burn on our triceps. Because we're all built a little differently, that might look different. It takes years to figure out how to take any given exercise that from goal number one, you already have good technique on, and you know how to push close to fail, and you can detect some tension and burn on the target muscles and make it an unbelievable tension and burn by optimizing that exercise for yourself. And that's not, yes, people can give you general ideas about, hey, try to push your knees more forward on the squat, try to do X, Y, Z, but a lot of it is just for you to figure out and explore. Goal number 3, be able to show up to a new exercise or a new machine, and during the warm-up sets and even during the work sets, raise your mind-muscle connection. That is, be able to impose and detect a ton of tension and burn by altering your technique and effort as needed during that time. That makes you the fucking Jedi master of the mind-muscle connection. If I go to a new gym and there's a leg press machine, I'm like, holy shit, that's trippy. I've never seen that machine. During the warm-up sets, I'll play with my foot position. I'll play with my depth. I'll play with the setup or how I angle the plate or how I angle the chair if I have to put something under my back. That by the time I'm doing the work sets, or by the time I'm getting to the end of the work sets, I have taken the degree of tension and burn imposed on my quads and elevated it significantly. I've taken an exercise that if I just mindlessly did generally good technique on, just go through the full range of motion, it would have been okay. I would have grown some muscle. I've taken that and made it into a great exercise. If you can do that with a mind-muscle connection, holy crap, you're going to be unstoppable. Eventually you get into temple during the revolution and the younglings are like, hey, you here to help us out? And you're like, nah, younglings, you ain't going to like this part. See you guys next time.